Ребятки, всем привет! Начинаем тусовочку со Скоттом Моссом. Продолжаем фармить фронтенд мастерс и углублять свои знания в React фреймворке Next.js. Давайте я сейчас разошлю ссылочку всем своим братюням. Так. Live. Да, ребятки, подписывайтесь на каналчик, на YouTube каналчик подписывайтесь. Подписывайтесь на телеграм-группку. Сейчас я скину ссылочку в чатик. Подписывайтесь на Boosty. Здесь я дублирую все наши стримы. Очень рекомендую. Так. Да, тут у нас roadmap статус. Я вот на Boosty опубликовал. Значит, мы сейчас проходим React.js Learning Path. React and TypeScript прошли. Introduction to Next.js. И сейчас вот сделаем запятую в Next.js, углубляемся в Next.js, со Скоттом Моссом тусим. Сейчас Intermediate Next.js. Потом у нас заказан курсик по RxJS, краш-курс с Monsters Lessons. Тоже сделаем отступление по просьбе зрителей. И вернемся дальше к Next.js. Вот. Ну а дальше есть идея вот зафармить Bootcamp, Learning Path. Это самые начальные уровни сложности, ну, самое базовое знание по веб-разработке, что есть на фронтенд мастерс, такие вступительные. И чтобы для тех ребят, кто новички, кто только знакомится с технологиями, с профессией, могли для себя что-то полезное подчеркнуть. Я имею в виду пропуск через мой опыт. Вот так. Что, приступаем к разминочке. Так, Urban Dictionary, это тоже мы пользуемся. Так, на кодоварс идем, да? Так, решаем простенькую задачку 8 Q. Значит, минутка моей славы. Progress that I have not trained on. Difficulty 8 Q. Exclamation mark series. Remove all exclamation marks from sentence, but ensure exclamation mark at the end of strings. At the end of string. Давай. Кажется, что... Да, кстати, я вот заметил интересную ссылочку здесь. How to create software engineer portfolio to land your first junior dev job. A portfolio isn't optional, it's necessary. Find out how to create standout portfolio. Зайти и ее... Слушай, что какие-то странные точечки? А, это прогружаются картиночки. Понятно. Кажется, интересная статейка. Можно ее прочитать. Да, как-нибудь заняться. Астра Девил. Ничего себе, какой Астра Девил. Кажется, что неплохая статейка. Мне, пожалуй, что мы ее прочитаем. Я ее добавлю в наш родмэпчик. Сейчас, секундочку. Откроем кодовую базу. Так, вот наш родмэпчик. Давайте я буду сюда кидать статейки, которые мы хотим прочитать, которые кажутся интересными. Это вот наши курсы. И я вот здесь вот... Знаете что, давайте я вот немножечко переструктурирую. То есть вот у нас будет сайт. Так, ну-ка, что там было? А, это. Не. Вот эту статейку. А, да, смотри, вы видите, тут подсказывает вот эта штука. Это, знаете что? Это Tab 9. Это установлен Tab 9. Вот эта дичь. tab9 AI. AI, и она делает автодополнение. Articles. Congrats on your first tab9 code completion. Да, рекомендую вам установить tab9. Как я пришел к этому tab9? Сейчас я вам покажу. Так, ну это... Я спросил у Арпа. Ща. Можно ли его встроить в VS Code? Он сказал, что нельзя, но есть интересные AI-компаньоны для VS Code. И посоветовал один из Copilot, но так как Copilot заблокирован для того, чтобы людям хуже жилось, чтобы они вовлекались в неприятности. Он еще посоветовал tab9. И я посмотрел, и действительно прикольная штука. Во. Не. Во. How many times I can ask Warp AI? May integrate you in VS Code. Вот, и он сказал, что tab9 нормальная тема. И я последовал этим инструкциям. И теперь использую tab9. И очень мне сходу нравится. Очень прикольная штука. Бесплатная. Там есть про-план. И кажется, что это must have для всех ребят. Короче, дичь называется tab9. Я в чатик скидываю. Так, это articles. Так, и еще будет special. Еще будет special. Вот, special. И это special, это вот этот наш курсик. Вот. Это он с приоритетом у нас. Так что, наверное, он будет выглядеть... Это будет выглядеть вот так. Not special. Так. Command B. Так, ну чё? Погнали на фронтенд мастерс. На кодварс. Так, давай train. Итак, что у нас тут? Coding and coding. Remove. Remove all exclamation marks from sentence, but ensure the exclamation mark at the end of string ну, можем просто в тупую пойти. Короче, вот у нас string replace all, восклицательный знак пустыми кавычками и прибавляем восклицательный знак. Только нужно посмотреть, что у нас replace all возвращает. Так, давай. MDN наше все. MDN. String. Replace all. Что он возвращает? Have pattern. Или regexp. И replacement может быть string или функция to be called for each match. The original string is left unchanged. Но она эту строку, она уже измененную строку возвращает. Да, то есть мы можем... Ну, по идее, это все должно так быть. Давай тест. О, смотри, заработало. Надо же как. Attempt. Submit. Very. Посмотрим, что, как остальные решали эту задачку. Ну, вот replace, да. Кстати, а зачем сделали, интересно, replace all вместо обычного replace? Интересно, какая мотивация была у этого метода. Давай посмотрим. ECMAScript. Replace all. Proposal. Да, вот это дичь. Вот, motivation. Давай посмотрим. Currently, there is no way to replace all instances of a stop string in a string without use of global regexp. Ну, а в чем проблема использования global regexp? Вот же вполне себе нормальное выражение. Только, что плюс означает, я забыл. Типа, не последний символ, что ли? Ну ладно, не будем сейчас об этом вдаваться. only affects the first occurrence. Типа вот эта дичь. Only affects the first occurrence when used with a string argument. There is a lot of evidence that developers are trying to do this in JS with thousands of words. Currently, the most common way of achieving it is to use global regexp. Ну а в чем проблема-то? Что не так с этим? В чем хуёвость? This approach has downside of requiring special regex characters to be escaped, not the escaped plus. An alternative solution is to combine string split with a range join. Ну а в чем проблема escape делать? Кажется, что просто надуманная поебень, совершенно надуманная. Ну, давай посмотрим Stack Overflow question. How do I replace all occurrences of a string in JavaScript? Asked в 2009 году вот этот чувак, Али, который Stack Overflow Goat Дрочер, который просто фармит Stack Overflow. И он, вот, знаете, вот собаке делать нехуй, собака лижет яйца. Вот так же вот этим дрочерам Али на Stack Overflow делать нехуй, они вот пишут вот такие вот вопросы. Вот такие вот вопросы пишут. Потом такие же дрочеры на них отвечают. А потом такие же дрочеры начинают делать replace all и засирать API-шку JavaScript вот этими мусорными методами. В общем, критика. Ну и мотивация, и это является, вот этот дроченный вопрос на Stack Overflow является мотивацией к этому пропозалу. А потом какой-нибудь дрочер, чемпион, вот этот, Матиас Буненс, напишет, что он является контрибьютор ECMAScript, Proposal, чемпион, прочее. Ну, дрочь, однозначно. Так, ну ладно, задачку решили. Давай дальше посмотрим. Тем не менее, да, я в первую очередь вспомнил этот replace all метод. Так, ладно. Так, а я как решил? Я вот так решил. Ну да. Split, join. new R. Вот самое уебанское вот наименование переменных. Это еще, об этом еще Илья Кантор писал в своем учебнике по JavaScript. Как переменные именовать. Сейчас. JavaScript info. Variables. Вот. Вот. Name things right. Вот, очень серьезная вещь. Name things right. Best practice. Это типа... А вот это что означает? Regex без power. Это точно. Вот это дичь что означает? Давай. Regexper. Regexper. Display. Типа все слова. Оставить только все слова. Join пробел, да, а потом плюс, потом concatenate с восклицательным знаком. Exclamation mark. Ну да, да. Ой, вот это вообще поебень. Аккумулятор. Var и s меньше, ну вот идем по строке. Говорим, что если символ не exclamation mark, то мы этот символ плюсуем, конкатинируем, аккумулируем в стрингу вот в этот аккумулятор. Таким образом мы фильтруем, просеиваем все exclamation марки и в конце в аккумулятор конкатинируем с exclamation mark. Ну, вообще, надо избегать этого кода, такого императивщины такой, и все-таки пользоваться API-шкой языка. Даже replace all. Даже replace all. Ну что, ребятки, давайте заканчиваем с разминочкой и приступаем к Скотту Моссу. Сейчас давайте откроем нашу IDE-шечку. фронтенд мастерс. Next.js. Intermediate Next.js. Да, запускаю эту команду. На прошлом занятии мы разбирали сервер actions, как это все происходит. Вот здесь у нас было freak out. Да, типа don't freak out. Как это пофиксить, я так и не раскурил. Не раскуривал, точнее. Сейчас мы находимся на step 0. Давайте npm run dev. Localhost 3000. Dispatch is not found. Sign in, sign up. Да? Или dashboard. Dashboard. Давай, sign in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sign in. Засайнились. Да, вот. Отправился сервер action. Вот это дичь. Что-то подгрузилось. Какой-то чанк из webpack. Или что-то такое. What is this? Hot update JSON. И подгрузилась страничка с дашбордом. Да, вот оно. Потому что мы засайнились. При этом у нас еще есть такая штука, как drizzle. Это что-то наподобие ORM-ки. Сейчас откроем package.json. Так, а вот эта дичь-то у нас же должна быть в dependencies. Точно. У нас косячок. Вот так должно быть. Вот версию обновили, потому что Drizzle Studio не срабатывала. Вот. Drizzle Kit Studio. Да, npm run db Studio. И запускаем вот здесь. И видим у нас одного пользователя. Да, а сама база данных у нас хостится на Турсо. Вот здесь. Мы это делали на первой тусовочке. Ну что, погнали? Следующая концепция. Да, нужно сказать, что курс у Скотта Мосса построен на обзорах концепций. Не в контексте постепенного пошагового построения приложений с использованием этих концепций, а уже на готовом приложении мы как бы их вот реализовываем и обозреваем.
Route slots, or aka parallel routes. I think route slots just makes more sense to me. Parallel. If I said, "Hey, you can do parallel routes," what do you think that would mean?
It's only two.
Yeah, you can do two, but like visually on the app.
Oh, they happen
Side by side.
synchronously.
Side by side, yeah. Like, but what does the URL look like? Exactly. Yeah, yeah. That's the part that I'm talking about. It's like, okay, so I always just call them route slots instead of parallel routes. It's basically where you can have different sections of a layout be an individual route. And we'll dive into that a little bit. And Next.js isn't the first framework to do this. Every framework I've ever used has had some concept of this. If you ever use like OG Angular, I think this was called
OG Angular, yo nigga, OG original gangster, yo.
Actually, I don't know what it was called. I can't remember. In Vue, it was actually called slots, which is why I call them slots here, because that's what it was called. In fact, you've actually already been using slots. If you have a layout, let's go to our main layout here. We're using children. Okay, children is actually the default slot. It's the slot that you don't have to configure yourself. It's given to you for free. In the case of a layout in Next.js, children is the current page, the child page of this layout, right? That's a slot. What we're going to be doing, parallel routes or route slots, are named slots that we create ourselves. And we can put them in a layout, and we can put them wherever we want in a layout. That's basically the difference. So there are some benefits. You get simultaneous rendering, so multiple components or pages can be rendered at the same time within the same layout, which can be really cool. This is very similar to what we talked about with the Astro Islands. So if you have multiple components on a page, each one of those is like its own page, then they have their own caching strategies, their own loading UIs, their own error UIs, whatever you want to do on a per page basis. Now think of that on a per component basis. That's basically what you get. And then you can do like conditional rendering. So, you might be able to say, oh, I want to show this slot if the user's level is admin. If they're not admin, show this slot. So you can dynamically show different slots depending on some logic. And then because it's server side, you can access the database. So there's some interesting things you can do there that you could not have done before in Next.js. But to be honest, a lot of frameworks already really had this. If you've ever built a React app using like React Router, you were able to do this pretty much already. So it's just bringing it over to Next.js. And because, Next.js does routing with folders and files, they have to, create a new syntax. And it looks like this. It has an @ sign. There's only so many characters they can use. And they chose the @ sign, which I'm starting to like it a little more.
На декораторы такая, миксина такая, дичь, такой синтаксис используют, декораторы такой используют синтаксис.
I think I have some better opinions on it. I might reach out to them and like, hey, maybe we should try this. But I think it's good. But basically, when you make a folder with an @ sign in front of it, you're telling Next.js that like, hey, this is a slot. It's not, and again, a slot is a page that's meant to be rendered in the layout with a given name. So I always just, maybe they should even like just call them slots. I don't know. But you make a folder with an @ sign in front of it. What this does, it's very similar to a grouping where when you have the parentheses around the folder, that name does not get included in the URL segment. So does this. If you have an @ sign in front of it, the name does not get included in the URL segment. That it does not change the URL at all, and because it doesn't need to. And I'll show you what I mean when we get into it. But whenever you do this, you make the folder, you now then have to go into your layout that is the parent, the nearest parent of those folders, and that layout will have as its props the names of those slots. So if I had a folder called team and a folder called analytics as slots, in its parent layout inside of the props, I'll have a prop called team, I'll have a prop called analytics, and it's literally the same thing as children with just those names, and I can put it wherever I want in the layout. There are some caveats with this, we'll see in a little bit, but so first we need to talk about two different types of navigation, just a preamble on that. You have like, hard navigation, or what I call like server-side navigation. That's when you make a request, it goes to the server, there's no caching, or there might be caching, but you're basically not using a client-side router. It's as if I went to your website, typed it in the URL, and hit enter. It's going to do a hard navigation, right? But when you use the link component within Next.js, that's a client-side router. It doesn't go to the servers. That's soft navigation. So when doing soft navigation, Next.js keeps track of what the active slots are, because again, they're not bound to a URL path. So the URL doesn't tell you what slot you're on. Next.js has to keep track of that for you. But when you do a hard navigation, it's impossible to know. Until your layout starts to render and that logic kicks in, it doesn't know. So, and because those slots are technically routes, they'll 404. So you don't want like random 404s on your dashboard if you have like multiple slots. So what you have to do is make a default. You make a default file in the slot to say, hey, basically, until you can figure out what slot needs to get rendered here, or if it ever gets rendered, here's the default component to render for this slot. Most of the time, it's always just going to be null. You're just going to return null, which is actually a valid component you can return in Next.js. You can just say null. At least from my experience, I've always just returned null. But if you don't, you'll just get a 404. And you don't want that. So.
Что-то пока сложновато. Ну, давайте посмотрим, как это на практике выглядит.
Okay, there's some talk here about examples with modals and this one's crazy. Tab groups and all different types of stuff. Let's just hop into it. So implementation, what we're gonna do is we're gonna make some new slots. We're gonna make a slots for our, basically, if you remember when I showed you earlier, I had the dashboard, and when you went to it, there were like 3 pieces on the app. There was like a list of events, all your RSVPs, and then like a count. Okay, each one of those was a slot. They were their own route. Okay, we need to enable that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a slot for events. We're gonna make a slot for RSVPs, and then we're gonna have our page, which is gonna be children. So the way I want you to think about this, if you look closely, if you look at this hierarchy of the folder system, I have an @events folder with a page in it. I have an RSVPs with a page in it. And then I have the page TSX itself. So that means inside this layout here, I'm gonna have all 3 of those as arguments. The page itself, that's children. RSVPs, that's RSVPs. The events, that's events. These are now arguments inside my layout. I can do whatever I want with them. I can put them wherever I want. So children is literally a slot that you don't have the name. It's the route that you're on. Okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to our layout. We're gonna do some stuff. I'll talk about this path name thing in a little bit, because we actually do talk about it a little later, but I'll glance over it here. The objective here is like, hey, if you're on the dashboard, we want to show you this dashboard view with these slots. If you're not on the dashboard, then we'll just load the children.
Концепция понятна.
So let's do that. Let's go to our layout on the root, or I'm sorry, should be the layout on the dashboard. Oh yeah, we got to make it. Let's do it. So layout on the dashboard, layout.tsx. And we don't have to make this one a client for the route segments or the parallel routes to work. That is not a requirement. The only reason I made this a client is because this is the only way to get the current path that you're on is with this hook. And hooks only work on client components. You might be asking, why do I always get the route on the server side? There is no good way to do.
Ну, а мы можем дойти до такого абсурда, чтобы... Ну да, наверное, не стоит. Я подумал, что если нам инкапсулировать вот этот хук в отдельный компонент для того, чтобы этот компонент оставить сервер-сайт рендерингом. Ну, я понял, что это чушь. Ладно.
Do that without some drawbacks.
Ну, я имею в виду про техническую возможность.
In Next.js, getting the current route on the server side. Sure, I can access the request. I can access the headers and get the URL from the headers. I can go to my middleware and attach the next URL to it and get it from the header. But as soon as you opt into those dynamic functions like headers and cookies, as we'll talk about later, you kind of like break all the optimizations that Next.js give to you for free. So there's no good way of getting the URL on server side. You most likely have to do it client side. So.
Ну вот, что и говорит Скотт Мосс, что there's no way.
So that's why I have this. Now, I could keep this as a server component, get rid of this, go make a component that uses this hook and, have it be like have like render props and then render my server component as children of the component that has this, and that might work, but again, that's a little too much work. I'm not.
Ну да, вот эти изъебы, они с render props, и они избыточные, не нужны.
Doing all that. So just to avoid the server component or the client component thing. So let's do that. I'm going to say use client. This is our dashboard.
То есть это оптимизация, цена которой усложнение кода, несопоставимая с величиной этой оптимизации.
One thing to note is when I first created this, I actually had the dashboard as a group. I didn't have it part of the URL segment because I think it's gross to have /dashboard in a URL. It's kind of redundant. But what I realized is that parallel routes don't work inside of groups. They have to actually be part of a URL segment. So if this dashboard was a route group like auth is, you would not be able to do parallel routes, or at least in my testing, I was not able to until I made this an actual route segment by getting rid of the parentheses. So you might run into that. If you don't, let me know so I can see how the hell you got past that, because I couldn't. Okay, so we have our children.
Ну, камон, что, бот набирать посимвольно. Давай. Так. Вот, road slots. То есть, я так понял, что в доке это называется parallel roads. А Скотт Мосс говорит, что для его ментальной модели road slots семантика более понятна. Поэтому он назвал здесь road slots. Вот, дашборд. layout ts6. Так, и чё, и как мы это? React. Props. Props with children, по-моему, да? Props with children. RSVP. S. Как там это расшифровывается, дичь? S'il React Node. Так, и Evans тоже. React Node. И еще нам нужно создать вот такую структуру. Evans и RSVPS в дашборде. Evans page const Evans page return new Evans page. Что-то вот какую-то чушь он подсказывает. Этот tab 9. Может, ему какой-нибудь контекст нужно скормить, чтобы он нормальный подсказывал мне. Return div Evans page export default. Так. И еще RS. Чё там? RSPVPS. RSVPS. 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 Ну, типа, RSVPS это типа пройдите опросничек. Так, и чё, и где? Вот смотри, у нас RSVPS. Подожди, sign out. Это вот у нас вот этот. Сейчас закрою всю эту поебень. Вот у нас layout. Это вот у нас shell, да? Вот это дичь. Ну, come on. Props with children. Еще, знаете, такая штука есть. Command-Shift-P. Sort imports. Короче, внутри шелла он использует... он рендерит вот этот, короче, JSX. Вот он рендерит events. children или вот так children. А children это вот page. Вот с home. Парди.
We're going to make a folder called events. So I'm just going to say events here. We're going to have RSVPs. So I'm going to say that. Okay. I'm going to use this use path name thing for now. Just know that this is a string that returns the current route. That's literally it. It's a string that returns the current route. That's what it is. It's nothing more than that. We'll talk more about it later. And then we're going to return a component here. I have a component called shell. You can just import that from. Make sure you import shell from component shell and not from loose-side React, which is the icon library. That'll give you an icon. You don't want that. You want this one. Why are there so many components called shell? I don't know. But this is our app shell. This is like the sidebar plus the tool.
Смотрите, а у кода Moscow это рублин, похоже, да, вот это?
Bar is the shell. And then whatever you put in between is.
Надо будет заняться табнайном, чтобы он мне подсказывал правильную дичь. Как ему скормить контекст. Fix code, write doc strings of code, explore code base. Try to using code explorer designed to help you get started quickly and efficiently. Workspace need to be enabled in order to use a workspace context needs to be enabled in order to use Code Explorer agent. Так, и как активировать workspace? На странице Tab9. 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 Open Hub. Это типа про, а стартер что? Full function code completions, natural language to code completions, learns your coding patterns and style. Угу. А стартер-то что? Только short code compilations. Ну, типа тупая вот эта дичь. Вот эту бред, да, он будет подставлять. Settings. Local machine, hybrid. Advanced только с Tab9 Pro. Additional settings. Нам workspace нужно включить, да? Телеметрии. Типа, как включить workspace? Needs to be enabled in order to use. Давай спросим у варпа. Workspace agent. How to enable workspace context. To enable workspace context in Visual Studio Code, follow these steps. Open VS Code, go to Extensions view, click in the Extensions icon and activity bar, search for Code Explorer extension. Ну ладно. Code Explorer. Вот это дичь. Да ну нет. Все, 136 загрузок. Мне кажется, что меня наябывает варп. Ну, давай. Давай, tab 9. Короче, что-то не ищется. Сходу. Как там еще раз этот семантика какая была? Enable an order workspace context. Вот, workspace context. How to enable workspace context in VS Code. Давай. Во. Enable in VS Code for tab 9 enterprise. Follow these steps. Sign in tabs console as admin. Go to workspace page under settings. Давай. Где это нужно делать? Workspace. Tab 9. Контекст. Текст. Enable. Tab 9 контекст. Go to the workspace page under settings. Давай. Так, где тут settings? settings. Content enabled. Log level. Snooze duration. Ну, что-то вот все Tab 9 настройки, и что-то нету здесь контекста. Ну, давай еще раз попробуем. Вот, settings. А может UI settings надо открыть? Как открыть UI settings? Хер его знает. Тогда Command-Shift-P. Tab 9. Clear. Open settings. В общем, в рот ебать. Погнали дальше. Не помогла ни дока, ни AI.
Children is the body. So that's what we're putting here. And then what we want to do is, if the path is dashboard, then we want to render the dashboard with the slots. If not, then just render the children, so not every page has that layout. We only want the main page, which in our case is /dashboard.
А зачем он это сделал, я не понял. Ведь здесь же дашборд будет однозначно. Это же layout для дашборда.
To have that, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to say path equals /dashboard. If so, we're going to do some stuff. If not, we're just going to say cool beans, just render the children.
Вот же, это же layout для дашборда.
Children here.
Вот. Здесь другого layout.
And then up here, what we're going to do is, let's wrap everything in a div. You know, it's Tailwind, so everything's a div. And you don't have to write all these divs. Just go ahead and copy that. There we go. Okay. So we have all this. If you try to render it, it'll probably break because we don't have any of the route slots yet. So let's go make those. So what we'll do is in our dashboard, we'll make a new folder. We'll say
дублирую ссылочку
events.
В чатик.
Inside of there, we'll make a page TSX. We'll make another folder in the dashboard. We'll call it RSVPs. So at RSVPs. Also put a page TSX in there. Okay. Let's just make some default pages. I'm just going to make a events slot. You can call it whatever you want. The name's not important. I'll probably have a different name in the notes. And you just need to return something. So I'll just return events here just so we can see it. I'll save that. I'm going to go to RSVP. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to rename all this to RSVPs like that.
Да, кстати, а почему здесь вот у нас нету? Здесь у нас home, А page у нас нет. RSVPs и events. Ну-ка. Events. Почему у нас не отображается здесь? Ни events, ни RSVPs.
Just putting some placeholder stuff in here. You put whatever you want. Just something that shows up on the screen so we can actually see the slots. Okay, so let's go see if this does what we think it does, which should, if we go to dashboard, should show the app shell on the right. Should be a page split up into 3 sections, one big one on the left, 2 on the right. If not, we broke something. Oh, we might have to make the default pages, but let's check it out. We'll see. We might get away with it. So I'm already signed in, I'm sure. So I'm just going to go to /dashboard. If you're not, make sure you sign in or sign up. And yeah, there we go. So here's my home page. The sections are there, but I don't see the actual content of the slots loading up. So I would expect to see events here. I would expect to see this here. So
Ну, естественно, мы тоже это ожидаем. Почему там нет этого?
I don't know why that's not doing that. You know, I might have to restart this since I just made some new folders. So sometimes when you make new folders in Next.js or you delete folders.
О, вот оно что. Sometimes when you make new folders in Next.js или delete folders, то вы должны рестартить сервачок, потому что...
You have to like rebuild it for it to catch it. So I'm gonna try that. If not, we'll just keep building it and maybe it'll resolve itself once we actually add the things. That was it. I just needed a rebuild.
That was it. I just need a rebuild. Западня. Вот тут пишем. Вот здесь. If we add or remove pages or change or add rows, change rows, sometimes we need a rebuild. Вот эту мудрость 1000 змей мы запомним. Делаем ребилд. Ждем-с. О, и случилось чудо.
So there you go. Now we have independent routes, independent pages as sections on one layout. You might be asking yourself, why the hell would I do this? I can just do this myself. I can just go get the data, do some CSS, you know, make a query for this, make a query for this one, make a query for this third one, and just put it on a page myself. Well, yeah, you can, but you have to think about everything that comes with that. Okay. You got a loading state for this one. You got a loading state for this one. You got a loading state for this one. You have an error state for each one. You have a fallback. You have all these different things that you will have to write code for if you want a great experience. By making each one of these a page, you don't have to do any of that. You get it for free because in Next.js, as you'll see in a minute, all we have to do is just make a loading file or an error file, and Next.js will handle that for us. It'll show the loading when it needs to show. It'll show the error when it needs to show. You don't have to write any logic for that. And it all happens server side, which is great for things like...
Это да, это он объясняет, зачем нужен нам parallel routing. Вот эта фишка.
Like SEO, which for this example doesn't matter, but yeah, things like that. So like, yes, you could just do it yourself, but you could also make a web app without React. So it doesn't mean you should do it.
So to clarify, Next.js is mapping the folder named events and RSVPs to the prop events and RSVPs in the layout component.
Correct. They are the exact same names. If I change the folder names, I have to change them in the layout and not the other way around. Oh yeah, let's just make our default route. So like I said, for the default routes, I typically just do a null. And again, we don't have a setup that's going to trigger an error in which the default route would be necessary. The reason you would need a default route for the most use cases that I've seen is because these slots could actually have nested routes as well. I could put routes in the slots. And if this event slot, let's say, had a route that the RSVP slot did not have, when that URL gets triggered, it's also going to, let's say I have a route called /dashboard/ I don't know, stats. So inside of events, I had a stats folder with a page in it. But in RSVP, I didn't have a stats folder. So whenever I go to /stats/dashboard/stats, nothing gets triggered for RSVP. So you get a 404 because it doesn't exist. So instead, I'll put a default there for the RSVP, which in this case would show like null. It'll show nothing. Maybe you would show something, or maybe you'll just remove it in your layout if you check the path name. But that's an example where you would want a default. Again, also on the hard refresh, but for us, because they're all on the same path, it doesn't matter. Even a hard refresh, not really going to do anything. I'm doing a Command-Shift-R to clear the cache and refresh, which we will be using a lot today. If you're using Chrome, we'll be triggering that. So let's make our...
Да, кстати, вот он юзает вот эту arc. Да, мы скачали его. А что там за Developer Tools? Вот этот arc. Давай его установим. Давай запустим. Open. Ну, нихуя себе. Create an account. А что, без этого нельзя? Без аккаунта нельзя нам потестировать это приложение? Сразу что-то требует. Name is required. Any nickname is fine. Just let us know what to call you if we ever talk. Камон, а чё, просто так взять и попользоваться этой дрочью нельзя, что ли? Даже несмотря на то, что я согласился на их термины об обслуживании и полицию приватности. Блять, я просто хочу посмотреть Developer Tools, как они сделаны. Как у них оно сделано. Я не хочу регистрироваться. Придумывать пароли. Чтобы, блять, потом получать рассылку на свой почтовый ящик. И так засранный. Вон у меня там 17 тысяч сообщений. В общем, первый опыт. Говно. Погнали дальше. Надеюсь, может, Скотт Мосс нам покажет Developer Tools. На этом арке. Он зарегистрировался. Там.
Our defaults just to be safe. So that just means we need a default for our 3 slots. Our first slot is this page. That's children. It's an unnamed slot, but it is a slot. So let's make a default file here. I'll say default.tsx. And I was going to say, home default.
Почему home-то?
And I'm just going to
Почему home-то? Это же дашборд. Он уже в дашборде.
return null. And I'll copy that. So home default just returns null. Same thing for RSVP's default.tsx. Paste that in there. Change home to RSVPs.
Давай то же самое сделаем. Скопировали. Дефолт.
There we go. That's a null. And then same thing for events. Okay, so now we have our defaults. We're good. But right now it's really not that interesting until we get some real data on here. So let's work through that because that's when I think all the can of worms starts to come out. And for the most part, I've watched a lot of people talk about this topic and teach, and this is the part where I see there's most of the questions, but also most of the confusion. I think because there's a lot of people, and no discredit to them, there are a lot of people that if you just follow the docs and you try to teach it, and the docs themselves don't have good patterns or examples, neither will you. So I think that's why you see a lot of people, if you go Google, like, how does caching a Next.js app directory work? You're not going to get anything good, in my opinion, or anything accurate or semi-accurate. So because a lot of people who are building with it are probably just busy building with it and not teaching it. So, but I built a lot with it, and I have some pretty strong opinions and some gotchas. So happy to talk about it. But any questions on this?
Can you explain the default aspect again? When does Next.js use the default?
That's a great question. According to the docs, the default file is used to render a fallback within parallel routes when Next.js cannot recover a slot's active state after a full page load. So during soft navigation, which I said is like client-side navigation when you use the link, when that happens, Next.js does keep track of the active state. You can think of that as like the sub page or the slot or the route for each slot. In this case, that would be like we only have one, so it would be page. But like some slots have other routes in them, right? You can have something else in here that has a page. So Next.js is keeping track of which one of these nested ones is the active slot for which one of these routes is the active route for this slot, right? We don't have any nested routes on our slot, so we don't actually run into this issue. What the default file does is it will load this default here when it cannot figure out what other route inside your slot needs to be rendered. on a full refresh because the tracking mechanism is client side. It's a cache. So when you refresh, it goes away. So it forgot. So that's what a full hard reload would do. So that's what the default will be for in the case of that example. The other example is this the example? Yeah, this is the other example I was talking about. So in this example would be, you can see, let me blow this up. You can see here that they have a slot called team. It has a sub route called settings, right? There's a sibling slot called analytics. It does not have settings. So if I were to go to /settings, that will load this slot and this slot's page. It will then, because these are parallel, they have to run the same. They do the same thing. That's why it's called parallel. It's going to attempt to do a /settings on this slot. There isn't one. So it'll 404. It'll break. So you set a default as in like, oh, if there isn't one, this is the one that you load. So that's what this would be for. We don't have this example because we don't have any nested folders in our parallel slots. I couldn't think of a use case. Like I don't know. This is kind of crazy, but yeah.
So that nested slot that you had, that would be its own page. But I'm curious too, like say you had another folder called settings. I guess that was outside of that slot. I mean, would you want to do that in that case, or would that kind of interfere with like this kind of layout or kind of configuration you have for the routing?
If you had another folder called settings outside of this example, that should be fine. In fact, I think they probably meant to put that here. I don't even know how this is working without a settings folder out here. Well, okay, there's a default here. Okay. Yeah, you would want that because this is not part of the route segment. So in this case, if you went to settings, there would be no page. It would only show this root default for children, and then it would show this default for analytics, and then it would show this page for settings, all inside this layout. But if you had a settings folder here, then instead of showing this default, it would show the settings page for the children in the layout, and then it would show the settings page for the team slot in the layout, and then it would show the default page for the analytics slot in the layout.
Got it. Okay. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
So parallel routes basically allow you to render multiple pages within your layout.
Yep, multiple pages within your layout that act exactly like pages. They follow the same rules as pages. They just don't have any route segments. Now we're going to move on to, we're just going to build on top of that and add more or...
Че, ребятки, давайте, 1,5 часа уже прошло от стрима. Давайте я объявляю перерыв. 15 минуток, 20. Так, и давайте что-нибудь вам включу. Ну вот как раз 22 минутки. это ода мотовству и потреблению, да? Такое бурлеска. Pink Mellow Swimwear, запомните. Не, я, конечно, девочек очень люблю, но вот подобный опломб, вот с мусорением деньгами и прочим, я осуждаю. Негоже так. Какая круто бедрая. Ну, скорее всего, надувная жопа. Тоже жопа надувная, сиськи сделаны. Ну что, ребятки, давайте еще одну девочку посмотрим и вернемся к Скотту Моссу. Ну все, на этом предлагаю закончить перерыв. Итак, возвращаемся к Скотту Моссу. Server-side data fetching. С роутами мы разобрались. Default routing тоже вроде как прослушали. Некая специфическая дичь, которая используется с параллельным роутингом.
Our first attempt
Погнали.
at server-side data fetching. So with React 18, and now 19, and Next.js 13, now 14, we have the ability to do asynchronous server components, which allows us to access database resources, backend resources directly inside of a component. So we can do like initial renders for components completely server-side without having to wait for the client to bootstrap, load up, download JavaScript, do all that stuff, and then make a query probably inside like a use effect or something, which is what you would normally do. So that's not new. It's not really advanced. I talk about that in the intro course, but we're going to talk about more advanced patterns, especially specifically like around like caching and things like that, and how all that works. So server-side data fetching. The best way I can describe it, I've been talking about it for a little bit now, but it's really like Next.js is like creating a route for you for every function that you make, and then you just call the function and you don't have to worry about managing the route. So that's like the best way I can describe it. And then in that function, you could do anything that you could do in like a route handler. So, the runtime is going to be whatever runtime that your environment supports. If you deploy to like Vercel or something, you can pick a runtime, whether it's Edge or just Node. So it's really just going to be like a route handler, but a component. Basically, some of the things here that you have to think about, though, when you're doing these server-side calls are going to be like optimizations around, redundant things or like, for instance, if you are loading up slots like we are, and each one of those slots needs to make sure that the user is signed in. So you need to make a call to the database to check to see if the user is signed in our case, 3 times. That'd be very wasteful to have to do that. So you probably want to like memorize that or cache that in some way. So these are like some of the type of things that you want to think about when you like make these calls. So it's really like you have to plan it out because it's not obvious. So mostly here I'm just talking about a lot of that stuff, memoizing, things like that. But it's so much easier if I just walk you through and show you. But some of the things here, in addition to doing memoization of some of the fetch requests, are going to be like persistent caching. So persistent caching is going to be, the way I can describe that is, it's like, even though we go in between routes, whereas like a memoization is like a per request, a persistent cache would be, it's always going to be there until you do a hard refresh, basically. Right? So we're going to talk about how do we activate that, how do we turn that off, how do we opt into it.
Здорово, братюнь. Рад тебя видеть на стриме. Давай, залетай к нам на тусовочку. Сейчас тусуемся со Скоттом Моссом.
Different things like that. The other cool thing is going to be, streaming and suspense. Again, this is not new to React or Next.js, but we're going to talk about how to actually use that in a way where it's practical, it's nice, it's not, something that's hypothetical, but it's something that's actually useful. I'll talk to you about like how I do it. So for this one, we are going to make a couple server-side functions here. So one, we want to lock down our application, because now since we created auth, we don't want people to be able to access pages unless they're authenticated. So we're going to make a helper function that gets the current user based off the token. So we'll do that. And then we're going to go make our functions that get the data for those route slots. We have those 3 route slots, right? We have one that like shows the attendees count. So we're gonna make a function that gets the attendees count. We have one that the home page, this one, which one? Yeah, this one actually gets the attendees counts. We have the one that gets the events. So like all the events. So we got to make that. And then we have one that gets all the RSVPs. So we have to make that one as well. So we're going to make all of those, and then we're going to put them in their appropriate slots. And then we're going to talk about, we'll explore all the different caching scenarios and gotchas, and then we'll figure out how we might cache those. So let's do that. So first things first is let's go make our function that we're going to use to get the current user in pretty much every single one of these routes that need to be protected. And the way that I did this, I typically make like a utils folder on the root of my app, and I kind of just scope it based off of the type of work is going to be done there. So in this case, I'm going to make a users TS file. At the top, I talked about this earlier, but I'm going to import this server only module here. All this does is it will throw an error if the file is ran in the browser. So if it detects window or any DOM related stuff, it'll throw an error. This way, this is actually very important because you're going to find out, and I've done this by accident so many times. It's like you'll go make a file like this that has like a lot of utility functions in it. Some of those functions operate on a server, and then some of them operate on the browser. Like you might have two functions in here. One is using cookies, and another one's using local storage. Those two functions cannot exist in the same file because one of them uses something that only works in the browser. The other one uses something that only works on the server on a request. So by putting server only, not only am I saying, hey, this can only work on the server, I'm also saying I have access to everything in the server and I shouldn't be putting browser stuff in here. Right, so let's do that. So I'm gonna go to utils. And actually, if you open this up, there's a few files in here. You won't touch these, but I can kind of talk about them. I'll talk a little bit about the auth tools. This is just some helper functions to sign us in, sign us up, hash passwords, things like that. Constants, always make a file in my app called constants. Where
Ну, мы смотрели эти функции в первой части.
or just put constant strings. This delay function, since now we're getting into data fetching and things like that, we're going to simulate a delay because otherwise it'll just come back too fast. Even Terso being hosted, it actually comes back so fast you won't actually get to see anything. So we're going to delay a lot of our requests so we can actually see what's going to happen. You can get the benefit of that. So there's a delay function here. So I'm going to make a new file, call it users. And then I'm going to get my imports.
Давай сделаем то же самое. Server-side data fetching. Вот здесь. В паре слов рассказал обо всем этом. Implementation. Utils. Что он тут делает? Он получает из cookies токен. Если нет токена, редиректит на sign-in. Получает юзер с помощью этого токена. Если нет юзера, опять на sign-in. А get user from token как? Вся выглядит. Токен. JSON Web Token Verify. А secret откуда берет? Понятно. Идет в базу данных. Достает из базы данных из дризла. Это вот у нас drizzle ORM. Ну вот, возвращает юзера.
So we got our cookie name, we got our cookies redirect, and this function called get user from token from our auth tools, which sounds exactly like what it says. It does exactly what it sounds like. And from here, we're going to say export const get user, or what did I call it? Get current user.
Ну, конечно, немного странная, да, манера перепечатывать сниппет руками и возвращаться в этот сниппет, чтобы посмотреть, правильно ли ты его перепечатываешь. Странная манера. Ну, блядь, нигер, хули.
So get current user doesn't have any arguments because it can access the cookies because it's running. We're going to be using it on React server components, which when you use the cookies function inside of a React server component or even in a server mutation, you have access to the current request, and cookies needs that. So this will work as long as we use it inside of a request. Now, if I were to go to use this, where would this not work? If I would just run a script and just run this would not work. There'd be no concept of cookies. It's the same thing I said earlier about test. If I were to try to test this, yeah, it's Node and it'll operate, but you probably wouldn't get what you thought you were going to get here unless this is like mocked out, but you still wouldn't get the value because there's no concept of cookies if there's no request. So something to keep note of. So we're going to get our token, which is going to be cookies dot get cookie name. So once we get that, the next thing we want to do is get our user from token. And well, first what we want to do is if we see that you don't have a token, we'll just redirect you to sign in. So let's actually do that. So if no token, then redirect to sign in. And you don't have to put a return here. This is interesting because redirect is like what's the word I'm looking for? It returns a type never, which is the same thing as return, as in nothing can happen after this if this is called. So it will terminate here if this actually happens. So you don't actually have to put a return there. You can if you want, but you don't have to. So we have that, and then we want to get the user, which is await get user from token. It needs to take in a cookie. A cookie is actually an object that has a name and a value on it. So that's what this is expecting. And then same thing. If not user, then go back to sign in. Otherwise, return the user. So now we can use this on any page.
Ну, кажется логичным, что если нет юзера в базе данных, очевидно, что sign up должен быть, а не sign in. Если юзера в базе данных нет такого. Хотя токен-то есть.
That needs protection, authentication protection. Later on, we're going to do a global way that just locks it down for us for free. But then we'll be just using this on server mutations. Whenever someone wants to do something on the server or access some data on the server, we would use this. But as far as like locking down the page, we'll do that somewhere else globally. Let's get in here and do some database stuff. So now we're going to make some attendees data. So what I'm going to do here is in utils, I'm going to make another file. I'm going to call it attendees. Attendees.ts. I'll grab my imports. I'll talk a little bit about.
Давай сделаем то же самое. Attendees data. А что такое? Как attendees переводится? Участники. Attendees test, так? Смотри, как правильно написал. Так, а чё оно ругается? Count total. А чё оно ругается? Count total. Attendees is unknown. SQL unknown. Так, а quick fix. Fix with tab 9. Ну-ка. Что нам tab 9? As number. Total attendees. In this case, the error message indicates that TypeScript cannot determine the type of count total attendees. To fix this, we can use a type assertion to explicitly tell TypeScript that a total attendees is a number. In reference. Так. А почему оно не распознало его? А потому что мы редюсу не скормили, да? Counts. А почему total attendees unknown в counts? Как TypeScript вычислил этот тип? Что это массив counts'ов? Это типа мы взяли вот этот pipe, или что это у нас? Чейнинг. В drizzle ORM. И вот заселектили, что вот это вот total attendees. Distinct. Count distinct. Ну, давай. А мы можем insert вот так вот сделать? Бах. Не сюда. Давай, дело говорит. Helpful. Наверное, helpful надо было назвать. Ладно.
Bottom, since you will be using this database stuff. So DB from @DB, that's the actual ORM from Drizzle that we'll be using. Don't worry, if you never used Drizzle. If you've used any ORM in your life, you'll be fine. If you've never used an ORM, it's an SDK for our SQLite database. So it's pretty simple. It's type checked. You'll figure it out. It's not too difficult, and you'll be following along. These imports from.
А как SDK расшифровываться? Да, давай. What is SDK? What is SDK? Say. Может, я неправильно назвал? SDK. Software Development Kit. SDK often include API, compilers, debuggers, documentation tutorials, sample code and projects, development environments and utilities. Все понятно. Software Development Kit.
Database. So it's pretty simple. It's type checked. You'll figure it out. It's not too difficult, and you'll be following along. These imports from the schema are the tables themselves. We can use them to reference different fields and things like that. We need them for our queries. These imports are filters for our queries. So EQ stands for equal. SQL is actually a function that lets you write raw SQL in our queries if we need to. And then delay is the function that I talked about. It's just going to delay a random time so we can simulate delay from an actual database and things like that. So, or an actual, we do have an actual database, but from like a slower database. So we're going to make a function called get attendees count for dashboard. So let's do that. I know, long name, but you know what? At least you know what it does, right? This is an async function. This is going to take in a user ID. So I could take in a user ID, or I could actually just pass. I could just call our function get current user with inside of here, and I actually had that at one point. But it completely changes the behavior of the whole app when I do that, and I'll tell you why when we get to caching. So first, I'm just going to simulate a delay here. Obviously, you won't do this in production unless you want to keep your job. So you add a delay, and then you're like, hey, I can speed it up. And then you took away the delay, and they're like, wow, you're really good. You made our app twice as fast. But other than that, don't put that in production. And then from here, we're going to, I'm just going to copy this query. This is not a database course. I don't want to go in and write all this, but I will explain it for those who are curious. Basically, what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, we want to select this field. We created a field called total attendees, which runs a SQL query that does a distinct. If you don't know what distinct means, it just means like dedupe. Just deduplicate all these attendees by their ID. From the events table, the events table has a join on it for RSVPs. The RSVPs table has a join on it for attendees. And I just want to find all the events who's created by ID equals this current user ID and group by events ID. So this is just going to return something that looks like this, an object with, an array with objects on it that say total attendees with a number. And then from there, because my schema is not good and my querying skills aren't that good, we're going to have to do some JavaScript to reduce that down to one number. Now, if you put this on a PR, I would approve it. I'd say, figure out how to do that with a SQL query and get that out of here. But we're not doing that right now. So here we go. We got the total. This is again just going to reduce.
А что, pull request был этот у него в проекте? Интересно. Ну-ка. Git graph. Только тайпа было. Это вот такие же дрочеры, которые впиливают в ECMAScript всякие методы типа replace all и прочее. Никто не прислушался к призыву Скотта Мосса.
The array of objects with these numbers down to just one number. So we just have one number that says, here's how many attendees you have. So we got that. and then we can just return that total. Again, you can do whatever you want inside these server functions. So we have our attendees here. Now we want to go add that to the page that shows the attendees. And for us, that's going to be the home page, which is the children inside the layout. So we're going to go there. So let's go back to dashboard. Let's go to page TSX on the root of dashboard. Make sure you're on the root of dashboard. Go to that page. This is where the attendees count is going to show. That's going to be the bottom right. I mean, I guess I should just show you. I should just go there and show you. It's going to be the bottom right part of the dashboard, this part. Okay, so let's do that. So first, get current user. So user equals await get current user. There we go. And then we can get the data from await, get attendees count for dashboard, and we can pass in user ID. And I know for sure that if line 6 runs, there is a user, because if there isn't a user, it would have redirected inside of this function.
Ну, это, конечно, сайд-эффект. Какая-то скрытая логика, которую не видно отсюда. Что мы по сути функции, которая должна предоставлять данные в query, да, то есть get current user это query, потому она и вот называется get. Мы в нее упаковали какой-то сайд-эффект. Это антипаттерн однозначно. Где он тут? Ну вот. Это однозначно антипаттерн. Что мы вот в этот query упаковываем какие-то сайд-эффекты. Это not clean код. Базовый принцип, который проповедует Мартин Фаулер, это separate command and query. Вот. Осуждаю.
So now we have our data. And then I think I have some JSX for this, so let's go and get that. Oh, it's pretty simple. So
Да. Сейчас я покажу. Вот, Мартин Фаулер, там книга рефакторинг. Мартин Фаулер. Separate command and query. Well, command query separation. The term command query separation was coined by Bertrand Meyer in his book Object-Oriented Software Construction. The fundamental idea is that we should divide an object's methods onto two sharply separated categories. Queries return a result and do not change the observable state of the system, are free of side effects, and commands change the state of a system but do not return a value. Вот. Because the term command is widely used in other contexts, I prefer to refer to them as modifiers. You also see them the term mutators. Вот. Мудрость тысячи змей. А ты что там? Скотт Мосс тут впариваешь.
Yeah, we're just gonna return a big number in the middle of that cell. So nothing crazy. Let's just get rid of
Блин, ну камон. Ну, не читал же по-любому эту дичь.
this. Oops. There we go. I'll just call this count like it is there. Okay, so now we have that. You might not have anything here because you don't have anything in your database.
Давай, скопируем. Че, куда мы идем? Дашборд, ап, дашборд, page. Dashboard. Page. Dashboard page. Do redirect if not authenticated. А это что, делает какие-то сайд-эффекты? Не, это не делает сайд-эффектов. Ну-ка, апретир. А, да. Что, сейчас появится home. Command Shift R.
That's totally fine. I thought of that. So in another tab, you could run the seed script. That's going to put some stuff in your database.
А, да, вот, error. Lib SQL error, server return HTTP status 502. Sync dashboard. Но мне сходу непонятно, что тут произошло.
Anything in your data in the middle of that cell. So nothing crazy. Let's just get rid of this. Oops. There we go. I'll just call this count like it is there.
Ну вот count, мы вот его возвращаем. Number.
Okay, so now we have that. You might not have anything here because you don't have anything in your database. That's totally fine. I thought of that. So in another tab, you could run the seed script. That's going to put some stuff in your database. You have to have a user in your database though, so make sure you sign up first. the C script will not work if you don't have a user in your database. So sign up with the sign up form, just so a user gets created. Again, if you need to check if a user is created, you can go to the studio and you can see if the user is created. Make sure there is a user signed up. As long as there's one user in a database, the C script will work. So now once you have a user in a database, you can run npm. Oh wait, actually I have more than one user in a database, so I'm going to delete one of them right quick because it just picks the first one. So give me a second while I do that. I'm gonna delete this one. Oh, you know what? No. I'm going to delete the other one. This one already has so much on it, so I'll delete this one. And then I'm deleting all the other stuff that already seeded in my database. You don't probably have any of this stuff, but I already did so much. So I'm just gonna start fresh so we're on the same page. Okay. So all I have right now is one user in my database. This is probably where you are if you signed up. You only have a user in your database and nothing else. Okay. If you are here, then you can do npm run db seed. And that'll do this. You can see it created 2 attendees and some RSVPs, and it also created some events for you.
Давайте сделаем то же самое. Остановим сервачок. CD фронтенд мастерс. Next.js. Intermediate. Так. Посмотрим, что в пакетже Соня. Сид. Ну, короче, инсертит в базу данных в drizzle ORM заглушечки, да? Скотт Мосс 3 месяца назад. ДБ. О, смотри. По табу он подставляет, возможно, нужное значение. Заинсертили. Ну-ка, что у нас там в Drizzle Studio теперь? Обновим. О, смотрите, видите, у нас теперь RSVPS, Events и Attendees появились. Attendees 0 отрисовалась. Да. Run dev. Четыре attendees.
So if I go back to my studio, I refresh this, I'll see there are some events, there are some RSVPs, there are some attendees. Yes.
How do you add types to the data from the DB so that something like count.total attendees is not an unknown?
That's a great question. So it is, in fact, already typed by default. I broke it because it can't infer this custom SQL statement that I made. But I'm pretty sure this custom SQL statement takes in, let me see. Yes, the custom SQL statement here takes in a generic. So I guess I could just say number.
Короче, SQL это типа custom SQL statement. Оно тянется, мы это можем заюзать из drizzle ORM. То есть мы в этот drizzle ORM можем инсертить custom SQL. Плохая тема.
And then now it's a number. So, but by default, it already is typed, but it just could infer this string. It has no idea what the string is. It could be anything. So, yeah.
And what do you like about Drizzle over Prisma?
It's a great question. I actually just started using Drizzle a couple weeks ago, and I'm using it in production now. And I didn't switch because I didn't like Prisma. I actually like Prisma. I switched because the database that we were using at the time, I don't even remember which one it was, didn't have really good support for Prisma. So we had to switch, and Drizzle was like the second best one. Or, I mean, that's all an opinion, but it was pretty good. So I was like, okay, I'll try it. And then once I started using it, I realized it's just so much better to have a schema in a JavaScript TypeScript file than it is in a non-JavaScript TypeScript file. Prisma is a Prisma file, which you can't do things like this. I can't make dynamic schemas. I can't, have functions. It's static in nature. So that's one thing. And then with Prisma, you have to generate the client to output the TypeScript, whereas with Drizzle, it's just TypeScript. It's just a TypeScript file. So the types are just there as soon as you hit save. You don't have to generate anything. It just knows. So I'll do like that. It is a little learning curve to use the querying language with Drizzle, but I've come to prefer it over Prisma's. Prisma took a different approach where how do we make this really easy? And for me, it became less powerful, whereas Drizzle's we want it to be extremely powerful, but we still want it to be simple. We'll let you pick. So I prefer that. But also the biggest thing was migrations. Handling migrations with Prisma was cool when it came to schema migrations, but when it came to backfilling columns from breaking changes, that was really difficult. They had no solution for that because the way that Prisma works, whenever you make a schema change, you got to generate a new client. So if you have a new client and you're trying to backfill some data from a previous version of your schema, the client isn't aware of that because the types changed. So it was really hard. And I don't think they really have a good solution for it. So that was the biggest push was we had a different database that didn't support it because it was a serverless database over HTTP, and Prisma's support for that is always experimental, use at your own risk. And migrations were just really tough with Prisma. I'm sure there's a way to get around the use case that we had, but with Drizzle, the migrations are programmatic. You literally make a migration file in TypeScript, JavaScript, and you run that. Whereas with Prisma, it's a CLI that you have to run, and it was just a lot more complicated. But I like them both. But Drizzle for now. Okay, so yeah.
Вот это было очень ценно. Это мы отметим. Почему Scott Moss мигрировал на Drizzle from Prisma? Это неплохая мотивация.
Let's see if this actually shows something on the page, yeah? Oh, there we go. Yeah, so it works. Let's do the same for events. So let's go make our events one. I'm going to make its own file inside the utils folder. I like to keep all these things separate. I'd rather have one file with one function in it than I'd rather have many files, each with one function in it, than one file with 5 functions in it. I don't know, maybe there's people who feel different, but that's just me.
But that's just me. Неплохой аргумент. Maybe there is a people who feel differently, but that's just me. Yeah, это я. Создаем в утилсах новую функцию. Events.js.
So we have our events. Same thing here. Oh, well, actually, we're not going to use this memorize thing yet. Act like you didn't see this. We're not going to use it right now. We'll use it later. Don't look at that. So we're going to export get events for dashboard. That's async function. Takes in a user ID. I think. Yes, it does. We're going to simulate a delay here. And then this query is a lot simpler, so I'm just going to copy this, but I'll walk through it. This query is using Drizzle's query syntax versus more of the native .select syntax. So this is actually a lot closer to what Prisma does. So I'm querying the events table. I want to find many where the created by ID equals the given user ID, and I want to select these columns, and I want to join this table, and I want to limit to 5, and I want to order by the ascending events.startOnDate. So it will show me the oldest ones first down to the newest ones on the start date. Because if this is the start date of the event, that means the older one at the top is the one that's about to show. That's the most upcoming one. That's the one that's about to start sooner than the rest, because its date is older, therefore less. Okay, so we got that same concept, server only. Everything's the same here. We got our delay. Let's go add this to our events page. So we'll go here, have our event slot. We're going to
Events RSVP. Поняли, да? У нас есть Events and RSVP. А Events это Events RSVP. Да? Я так не думаю. О, смотри, запомнил. Try out 40 days preview of Tab 9 Pro. А, это типа мне Tab 9 такой подарочек, да, типа сделал. А, тя-тя. Негодяй. Event status. А чё оно? А где оно undefined? Почему оно undefined? Ну вот, давай посмотрим, как Скотт может с этим справиться.
add async here. Wait, did I do that in the page? Did I do async? I just realized that. Oh, okay, I did. I'm perfect. All right. So we'll do async here, and then we'll get our user. Okay. And then we'll get the data. So that'll be await get events for dashboard. Take some user.id. And then let's get the JSX for that. Oh, wait, I guess I need to return the data, huh? Sorry about that. I'm just going to return the data or empty array. That way, it won't break my map inside of my my page. So it's always an array, just in case this does it. So we got that. And then the JSX is a little more complicated here. This is not a UI course, so not really going to talk too much about it. So I'm just going to grab these imports in the wrong file. There we go. And then let's get our JSX. Oh. Okay. There we go. Cool. Okay. So let me change this to events. There we go. This is really just like making like a table with some columns in it, and you can click on one of the events. We'll make that page later. Nothing too specific, just using some of the components from the component library. Feel free to check it out. If you know React, it'll make sense to you. It's nothing crazy. So let's see if that loads up. There we go. So latest events loads up. If we hover over this.
Да, посмотрим. Воу-воу-воу. Работает. Type string is not assignable to type undefined. Ну, типа... Disabled. А что, не починил? Это не починилось? Давай попробуем, может быть, поможет. TypeScript restart test server. Нет. Или undefined. Бред. Давай quick fix. With tab 9. Ну-ка. SKU of type of status colors. Типа кастинг сделаем по key of status colors. In this fix we are using the as keyword to explicitly cast the event status to the type of keys in the status colors object. This ensures the TypeScript knows that the value of event status will always match one of the keys in the status colors object, thus resolving the error. Действительно. SK off type of status colors. Ну и чё, и ничего. Undefined. Вот так заработало. Вот так заработало.
Or this, you'll see it'll try to link to some page we haven't created yet. You'll get a 404 if you try to go there, probably. Yeah. Loads up. This, you'll see it'll try to link to some page we haven't created yet. You'll get a 404 if you try to go there, probably. Yeah. Loads up pretty good. If we refresh, it's still there. If I do a hard refresh, it's still there. Maybe you want that, maybe you don't want that. What if a new event came in? Does it get it? Who knows? And then for the last one, we'll do the RSVPs. So RSVP is a little more difficult query because the schema.
At the time of recording, the code for RSVPs page was wrong in the Notion file. It now contains the correct code.
Was bad. So let's do that. We'll go to utils, make another one, RSVPs.
Давай сделаем то же самое. RSVPs. User events IDs.
And call this function get RSVPs for dashboard. So let's do that. And this one takes in a user ID. There we go. Await our delay. And then I'm just going to bring in this query logic. So I'll talk about this a little bit. Basically what I'm doing here, using the query builder from Drizzle, I want to find many events where the created by ID equals the current user ID. Select the ID of all these events. Only continue if if this user has events. If they do, then I want to select from the attendees table, make sure they're distinct, so dedupe them, where an RSVP's event ID it's one of these users' events IDs, and I can get the RSVP because I'm joining it to an attendee, because an attendee has a one-to-many relationship with the RSVP. So one attendee can have many RSVPs, so I can join on here. And then I can join the events on the RSVP because the RSVP knows what event it is for. And that's how I'm able to access those. And then just order by the created at descending, so I can show the latest RSVP at the top with the oldest ones at the bottom. And that's what this is. So I get back an array that looks kind of weird. It has like an events object, which is just one event. It gets back an RSVP object, or RSVP's object, which is just one, and attendees, which is just one. It's like an array of all of those. So it's kind of weird how it's formatted, but there it is. And then the JSX for that. So I'm just gonna copy this right quick.
Сделаем то же самое. Is possibly null. Type undefined cannot be used as index type. It's possibly null. Грязь, конечно, грязь.
And we'll go into the RSVPs, or RSVPs. Here we go. So for this one, we get our imports in, and then for the JSX, well, first let's get the user and let's get the data. So async user awaits get current user, and then what do I call it here? Events equals awaits get. What did I call it? Get RSVPs for dashboard. I don't know why I'm calling them events, but RSVPs for dashboard takes in a user.id. There we go. And then from here, all of this JSX, which is not innovative or important, but necessary. So I'll just loop over those. And it's going to be another table similar to the one that we just did, just slightly different. Put those on the page. Really, like I said, nothing special. It's just JSX. The important part is what's going on here. So let's see if that loads up. And it does, but doesn't. Let's see. So
the notion Stock is importing events again there. The GitHub is different than.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I might have wrote it wrong in Notion. That's okay. We'll just go to GitHub and get it, and I'll fix it in the Notion. So let me go to GitHub. Go to my app. Go to dashboard, RSVPs, page. Yeah, it's way different. That's why I was looking at it like, I don't know if that's the same. So let's try this. Get the data and do that. There we go. Okay, so now let's see if this loads. There we go.
Все равно грязь. Going. Какие-то ошибки ужасные. Че, ребятки, это последний урок на сегодня. Сейчас мы его досматриваем и будем прощаться.
So now we have our 3 slots loading data independently from each other. And they're all their own pages, but they're yet still in the same layout. And if we go to, well, I guess we'll have to wait to make this route to go to it, but we only want to show this layout if the path name equals /dashboard. If we go somewhere else, we don't want this layout, but we'll wait till we make some more pages for that to happen. The way I think about it is like it actually works the way you think a React component will work. Like who here the first time they ever used React was like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna call a promise at the top of this component. Oh wait, that doesn't work. I gotta put it in back then, a lifecycle method. And then now it's like a use effect, but it works the way you think a regular function would work. So to me, it's easier to understand. Yeah. You got a question?
Yeah, I was curious, so with the interactions between like a server component and like a server action, is like one of the benefits then like being able to keep like the server state in sync with like the client. Like if you were to perform a server action that maybe updates like a user as an RSVP, how would that behave within the React server component in this context?
So if you wanted to take one of these and like update it, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, because, well, in this example, so if you wanted to stay within like the whole server actions, ecosystem, you'd have to go make a client component that you would bring inside of here. And then that client component would import a server action that did the update. And then you can pass in as a prop whatever you want into that component. So in this case, like RSVP ID, the things you want to update, and then that component can render that, because you won't be using like the server actions inside this server component, because there's no way to capture an interaction like an on click or something like that. So how would it know when you want it to run the server action? So the server action has to run on some client component. So that's how that would work. Let's do this.
Все, ребятки, благодарочка за тусовочку. Остальное мы попробуем добить в следующую серию. Всем